When will coronavirus end? Welcome to Honey of Knowledge. This is Ashish Gaurav, and today we are talking about the end of coronavirus. So, what do we have here? I am no astrologer, but I will tell you what data tells, no less, no more. World Health Organization WHO says that 80% of the infections are of asymptomatic in nature, which means they do not show any symptoms and are spreading the disease silently. But there are also reports which say that 80% is not the correct number. It could be as low as 40%. So, given these numbers, what does this thing even mean? 80% asymptomatic cases means out of every 5 people who are infected with coronavirus, 4 go undetected and are slow, silent spreaders. So, if we have 5 people out of them, every 4 are silent spreaders. These guys, 80% asymptomatic cases mean these people are the silent spreaders in the community. This is the positive case, and this is not positive, but they are actually positive. And 60% of asymptomatic cases means that these guys become from 4 to 3. So 60% means right now in the box you have 3 such people and 2 are detected positive. And similarly, if you take 40% asymptomatic cases, this box reduces from 3 to 2. So you can see that if we change the percentage of asymptomatic cases, the number of silent spreaders reduce from 4 to 3 to 2 out of every 5 coronavirus infections. Now, we don't really know in which of the regime we are in, 40%, 60%, 80%. So, we don't know the extent of silent spreaders in the community. So let's just run through a model which takes these 3 numbers and does a kind of sensitivity analysis on when will we get all infected or when will our population be herd immunized without any vaccine. This is the Google Sheet with which we would be working. If you recall the previous video about Corona, COVID-19, we have already understood that India can only double 30 times because India's population is not allowing it to double for the 31st time. Now, we also understand that currently we are uh, doubled to 18 times. In the previous video we had doubled 17 times, but now we have doubled 18 times. So taking these things into account, let's look at the understanding of herd immunity with this basic background of asymptomatic cases. Now if you go to the tab of herd immunity, there are 3 cases for which we will be doing the sensitivity analysis: the 40% asymptomatic cases, the 60% asymptomatic cases, the 80% asymptomatic cases. Now, what happens with this asymptomatic case percentage is the implied real infection balloon up, because right now our infection count is 3,21,626. But if we take into the consideration of asymptomatic cases, it balloons to around 5.3 lakhs for 40%, 8 lakhs for 60%, and around 16 lakhs for 80% asymptomatic cases. Now, what we can do from here is how much time it will take for the entire country to get infected. If we take the 40% case, then it comes roughly to be around 67 to 181 days. How I get 67? The reasoning is this: if I take 6 day as the doubling rate, it comes to around 67 days, and if I take 16-day doubling rate, I get 181 days. Now, how I got these numbers? It's very simple. Now look at this thing, multiple is calculating how many times we need to multiply, or rather double, so that from this case we go to the full population. This is calculating a function which is log, which is very commonly used to calculate the power. Similarly, we can do it for 60% and 80% cases. And if we take this snapshot, we understand that the entire population can get infected in either 2 months, or it could take even 6 months. Now, that's quite robust here. We don't have strong fluctuations in the lower and upper bound, even if we take different cases for asymptomatic cases. So it's quite robust. We have to understand that it could take anything between 2 months and 6 months. Now, what about herd immunity? We know that according to Wikipedia, around 29% to 74% of total population needs to be infected to be herd immunized. So these are the herd immunity thresholds. So if we take the 29% of population, and how do we do that? We just take 0.29 of India's population, and I got India's population from uh, Worldometer. So if I come back and take 0.29 percentage of India's population, I get this number, and similarly for 75% is this number. Now, if you remember, I had calculated a multiple here. Now, similar multiple can be calculated here also. Now, how do we do that? This is the multiple 10 and 12 corresponding to both the herd immunity thresholds. This is the number of people, if they get infected, we will be herd immunized for the 29% scenario. Now, if we take this population and uh, divide it by the current infections, we get this number. Now, this number can be used to calculate the multiple here, again using the log function. And similarly for this, if we take these two numbers into account, 10 times and 12 times, and multiply it with 6 days. Now you have to understand these are not exact 10 number. I have reduced the decimal place. You can increase the decimal place to check the exact number here. So if you multiply these with 6, 7 and 16, you get these numbers. Now why are you doing with 6, 7 and 16? If you recall the previous video and go back to the doubling tab, we know that the doubling average is 6 to 7 days only, the cumulative doubling average. And the actual doubling has been continuously increasing, and now we are at a doubling rate of 16, which is the actual doubling rate. So we are using 16 here also, apart from 6 and 7. Now this was the baseline case when I'm not taking into account any asymptomatic cases. What if I take into account asymptomatic cases? So let us look at that scenario also. Now, if we take the 40% asymptomatic cases situation, what we need to do is just modify the total infections from 3.2 lakhs to 5.3 lakhs, which is the implied real infections because of the 40% asymptomatic cases. And if we do repeat the calculations, we get these numbers. Now, these numbers are not very different than the numbers which we get from the baseline situation, because in the baseline the numbers are from 62 to 186, which is roughly speaking around 2 months to 6 months. So it's similar to what we got for how many days we need for total population to get infected. And over here it's 57 to 174. So you see there's a very small difference in the number of days required, because it's the thing about compounding. Most of the damage or most of the gains from compounding effects happen at the very last stages. So we don't have much variation even if we go from baseline to 40% asymptomatic cases. Now what about 60%. Let's do that. In 60% scenario, we just need to change the number from 3.2 lakhs to 8 lakhs. And again, we get a very similar kind of a situation. So lower bound has not changed by much, around 2 months, but upper bound has changed a lot. Now it's no longer 6 months, but roughly speaking, it's around 5.5 months. Let's go to the 80% situation now. Looking at the scenario when we have 80% of asymptomatic patients, what we understand is the number of days for herd immunity to kick in varies from 48 days to 149 days, which is quite strong improvement over our earlier situations of 2 months to around 6 months. So this is roughly 1.5 months to less than 5 months. So there's a strong case of positive news if 80% of our people are asymptomatic, because at one hand they are spreading the disease, but a good thing is most of the people are asymptomatic. They don't get affected severely. All of us get infected soon, but the disease does not create havoc here. Now, these are my analysis. I mean, if you talk to any epidemiologist, obviously he would have a different opinion on 80% asymptomatic cases. He would say that it's not a good scenario to be at. But what I look from numbers, I feel that if we really are at this case of 80% asymptomatic patients or 80% asymptomatic infections, we are soon going to recover in less than 5 months. That is for sure. But the idea here is this is a current status or the snapshot today, because 16 days doubling can easily increase to 18 days doubling or 20 days doubling. But the good thing about that is if doubling changes from 16 to 18 to 20, we would be having more time in our hands to increase the infrastructure, and maybe we could contain the disease by good isolation measures. So even if the doubling reduces, we would reach the herd immunity faster, and if doubling increases, what I mean to say is if doubling is taking place in longer number of days or longer amount of time, then the infrastructure of the government or nation would be good enough to contain the disease. And if the doubling is happening at a faster rate, faster than 16 days, then herd immunity will kick in sooner. Now, these are oversimplifications and just a way to give you an idea how things are happening. I do not mean to predict the real number of cases, or I do not mean to predict when it will end. But yes, this is what herd immunity and doubling rate predicts from numbers, that when and how coronavirus can end. So with this, we end this video. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up and please hit the subscribe button so that you do not miss out on future videos. Thank you. Bye bye.